behind the antique desk, and the memory of how our first meeting had felt exactly like a job interview came flooding back. I knew better than to expect any type of refreshments to be offered. There were establishments where the customers were offered a glass of champagne as they shopped for gowns, but Fleur's had a strict ban on food, drinks, small children, and anything that walked on 4 feet. "So, just 3 weeks until the big day," Gwendolen said, smiling in a way that managed to reveal practically every one of her teeth. I felt the nervous knot of tension in my stomach, the one that kept giving me sleepless nights the closer it got to my wedding day, twist and tighten. "Yes, it's all gone terrifyingly fast. I just hope I haven't forgotten anything. You were absolutely right when you said 6 months wasn't long enough to plan a wedding." "All you really need are 2 things," the shop owner declared. "A magnificent dress." She inclined her head towards a curtained cubicle where I guessed mine was waiting to be tried on. "And a truly wonderful groom." I gave a small, happy sigh and smiled. One of those I definitely had, although I knew the jury was still out on that verdict as far as some members of our wedding party were concerned, one of whom was my mother. It probably hadn't helped that she'd had so few opportunities to meet and get to know her future son-in-law before he officially became a member of our family. Or was I becoming a member of his? I really wasn't sure of the protocol. Part of the problem was that my mother lived in Cornwall, and the other part was that she hated men. No, that wasn't entirely true. It was only my father she truly disliked, which is probably part of the reason she also hated marriage, both as an idea and as an experience that, having tried once, she'd chosen never to repeat. Darryl liked to describe his future mother-in-law as delightfully eccentric, a phrase I hoped for his sake he never decided to share in front of her. He also took considerable delight in her celebrity status, certainly far more than I had ever done. My mother is an author, a very successful one. If I told you the name on my birth certificate, you'd know instantly who she is. There's probably not a child in the country who hasn't read one of the books in her series about magic, witches, and fearsome molten lava-spewing dragons. I was uncommonly popular at school, which had nothing whatsoever to do with me. I was a quiet and introverted little girl, the kind who lurked at the edges of the playground, who never dared to hang upside down on the climbing frame, who was the last child over every finishing line on sports day. But there was an almost obscene clamour to be my friend, to be invited back to tea after school, or even, the holy grail of achievements, to be invited for a sleepover. I've no idea whether my classmates were disappointed to discover we lived in a very comfortable but otherwise boringly normal house, rather than the castle they were clearly expecting. My father had bounced happily from one money-making scheme to another, doing his best to spend my mother's income at a rate that almost outpaced her ability to earn it. It was certainly a surprise when, after many years of living together, they chose to get married just before my 5th birthday. Far less surprising was their divorce, just after I turned 8. My father had disappeared to Spain shortly after that, taking with him a sizable chunk of my mother's latest advance, which he'd used to open a bar in Malaga that unexpectedly became hugely successful. He'd left nothing behind except bad memories for my mother, and his surname, which I legally adopted. This, at least, prevented me from having to answer the inevitable, "I don't suppose you're related to," every time I was introduced to someone. It was difficult to know if some of my mother's anti-Darryl feelings were because, despite her objections, I'd asked my father to give me away at the wedding, thereby forcing my warring parents, who hadn't exchanged more than a dozen words in over 20 years, to spend a day in each other's company without killing their former spouse. "Does the dress look good?" I asked, suddenly aware it had been several minutes since either Gwendolen or I had spoken. Normally I was comfortable with silence, but today I wanted noise.